Right, the show where we explore the future of filmmaking through the eyes of people shaping it, from LED volumes to location scanning, digital humans, and AI cinematography. I'm your host, Rob Chandler. This week on the Starting Pixel podcast, we're joined by Quentin Jorquera, a cinematographer turned virtual production supervisor with one of the most eclectic and emotional tuned in backgrounds in the industry. Born in France to a Spanish, Italian, and Romani family, Quentin's journey took him from the islands of New Caledonia and Vanuatu through classical training in Paris to film sets in Cambodia, New Orleans, London, beyond. Along the way, he's been an actor, film critic, gaffer, and creative director, each chapter feeding his uniquely grounded and poetic approach to light, technology, and storytelling. Now leading virtual production builds across the UK and France, Quentin brings a system-thinking mindset and a rebel core to the world of LED volumes and real-time workflows. In this episode, we'll talk about emotional cinematography, cultural hybridity, practical VP setups, and how to keep storytelling front and center when working with tech that's evolving faster than ever. Welcome, Quentin. So first of all, tell us a little bit about that eclectic background that you had and how you ended up doing the virtual production. Take us through your story.
It's a long story that, you got it all right. I was born in France and I grew up in New Caledonia and Vanuatu, so quite far away, near Australia, South Pacific. These are two places that are like small islands. So I lived there until I was about 15. One day I decided to leave my little island and go to Paris and learn cinematography. So that's where it all started. I spent 12 years in Paris, and I actually started as a film critic. I was 18 then, and I spent my time going to all the festivals. So I went to Cannes Festival with invitations to all the parties, all the events. Same for the Venice Film Festival.
What year are we sort of talking about here?
I'd say 28, between 2008 and 2010.
Okay, cool. Okay.
And this leading to absolutely nothing. And I was doing a lot of theater on the side. I had created a small association in Paris where we were doing a lot of plays, trying to finance short films and stuff like that. So I thought, well, one way to get into the film industry is to become an actor. I'm not 100% sure what I learned, but what I did learn is how hard it is to be an actor and to work with actors and to be a bit more, I guess, sensitive to the way actors have to work their scenes and the way they feel when they act and things like that. But I went to a school called 3IS, Institut International de l'Image et du Son. It's a French school, but it's a school that has a lot of, like, a very good reputation in French for training technicians, people that will be useful on set from the day they leave the school. And spent my first year there not really knowing which branch I wanted to go. Second year, you have to choose a specialization. And I went for cinematography. I had realized that I had always been very sort of sensitive to light and to images. After that, just working at different positions in the industry on different type of projects. From 2015 to 2019, I spent my time on sets working as a cinematographer for short films. And I think after a few years, back in 2017 or 18, I started doing my first paid gig as a DOP and entering really the world of being a DOP, being able to pay my rent with that work.
Yeah. So, and what happened then? Where did you jump to?
Well, I actually managed to get some work in Cambodia. I was offered to do first a music video, which was pretty fun experience. It was quite interesting. We were in we're shooting in old buildings where you could literally see still bullet holes from the Khmer Rouge era and stuff like that. There was a guy in Cambodia who has a sort of a TV channel online. I went to see the guy and I thought it was very interesting because he's barely spoke English, and it was one of the most amazing experiences I had. So he had at this moment one of the most ambitious productions that he wanted to do. So he was like, "Are you ready to be paid like almost peanuts?" I was like, "Yeah, who cares? Let's just go." I spent I think 3 months between the jungle and different places in Cambodia, shooting that with an entirely Khmer crew. Only my second AC was speaking a little bit of French because she had been to a French school, and it was amazing. It was incredible.
Brilliant. How did you get into virtual production? What was that step?
It seems like a lot of our contacts are in London. A lot of the people in virtual production are in London. The shoots are happening there. Let's go. I had never been. Um, so yeah, early 2020, 2021. Just when I landed in London, I think 4 days after there was another lockdown. That's when I decided to just go back to what I know how to do. I've been doing DOPing. I've been doing a bit of production as well as a production manager. And I'm like, okay, well, let's start a production company in London and do small commercials and try to find clients. And I spent a year a bit frustrated because I felt that this whole virtual production thing was going on for other people, but nothing was happening for me until someone contacted me on LinkedIn out of nowhere saying, we're building a big virtual production stage in Paris. Here we have partners that are Isaac Partouche, Margot Durand-Rival. So Isaac Partouche was at the time the head of virtual production at DNEG. He had just done Dune, Matrix, like a lot of projects. And Margot was one of the biggest professional I know in previs and techvis. And I was like, yeah, hell yeah. And when I arrived, everything needed to be built. We just had a huge hangar,
Right.
and
Wow.
so we built walls, everything, created the whole basic studio from scratch. And then we had to start building a virtual production pipeline with Isaac and Margot. We were starting to work on previous projects. That's where I learned Unreal Engine. And I spent maybe, these 5 weeks with half my salary, literally sleeping at the office and working 24/7. I had a little office with one computer, and that was pretty intense.
Right.
Yeah, out of that, I realized what was possible to do with the Unreal Engine on a broader scale, as in not just for virtual production, but also making movies. I started doing, there was a show called, it's Benjamin Franklin, actually, the Apple TV show.
Yeah, with Michael Douglas.
Yeah, so we had a few scenes to previs for that. That was pretty interesting. I was like, okay, that's all fantastic, but I need to be on set, and I miss being on set and talking with directors and producers and stuff. I didn't know what the virtual production supervisor was at the time. I don't think it was back in 2021 or 2022. It was not really something. I mean, still now people don't have real definition for it, and so we had just received the LED panels at the time. So we had a 20 by 7.5, I think, wall to build. That's in meters. And we had, I think it was 12 render nodes to build from scratch. Literally from scratch. We ran a lot of demos because that was a big thing with virtual production. You had to convince people. It was the first major studio doing VP in France.
We're going to go to a break now. And then when we
Yeah.
come back, we'll talk a little bit more about that side of things. This episode is brought to you by More Than Wolf. Not sure where to start? How big a stage do you actually need? What about driving plates? Do you even need them? Is Unreal Engine necessary? Wait, what is Unreal Engine? You're thinking about virtual location scouting, but should you? How much is this all going to cost? And the big one, am I about to wreck my career by going the virtual production route? Yeah, there's lots of questions, and guessing your way through virtual production isn't the answer. That's where More Than Wolf comes in. We're an independent virtual production supervision studio, here to guide you from cradle to grave, whether you're just dipping your toes into VP or knee deep in LED walls and camera tracking. We make sure you get exactly what you need. No overspending, no mishaps, just the right solution for your production. So if you need someone in your corner, choose More Than Wolf. Visit morethanwolf.com to find out more. More Than Wolf. Why film it any other way? So that's a really, really interesting story. And I'm sure that it's pretty unique as well. And a great example of seizing the opportunity in life and taking risks,
Yeah.
right? Which is great. So let's go back to a little bit about your work. I think probably it'd be great to get the listeners sort of understand a bit more about what it's like to be a VP supervisor.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm not the most experienced VP supervisor out there, but I did do recently a pretty big commercial campaign for Schweppes. I was able to really go through the entire process of the work of the VP, the VP supervisor, which I was afraid I would not be able to at first, because I was called very down the line by a VFX company that was saying like, okay, we're going to shoot there, and you're gonna just be here on set, but we're not going to involve you in all the pre-production process. And I hammered my way through, but luckily enough, the clients and the bigger production company in the background, which is Ridley Scott Associates, they're based in London. So I brought them into. I knew we were going to use a Moses tracking system because the studio that the VFX company had chosen was using that. So I was like, okay, let's go see Moses and we'll have a look. So I managed to get a hold of the director, the DOP, the production designer, and the producer, executive producer. So I managed very early on to be like, okay, I need to be present from day one. Otherwise, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know where we're going. I don't know what's going to happen. And everything is happening in pre-production. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand is like, I don't think on-set supervisor for VP is a thing unless you're a core team that has been working together really well. But then even like I think it's weird, like you need to have a full control and understanding of what's happening and what has been happening on the production from the beginning. So yeah, I mean, and during that production has been working a lot with the production designer was the part that I had not imagined that would be so important. But I didn't realize that. I mean, luckily the production designer was William Tai, who's the amazing production designer with a huge career and a lot of work actually on VP for ILM. He basically took me by the hand from the beginning and said, "Look, mate, like I'm going to need a certain amount of content from you that I'm not able to get from other people from the production process who would be normally supposed to give it to me. So we're going to dive into a tech viz that was made for the production designer to understand exactly what he needed to build and not a single square centimeter offset more."
And was that why was that? Why couldn't he get that from any other way
Because
else?
the VFX company that was on board didn't have VP experience at all, and they didn't have a lot of previous experience. And very early on, when they hired me, I said, "Well, you're going to need to book me for supervising the previous and the tech these parts." And they were like, "No, that's not VP. Like, we will do it." I was like, "All right, okay." And the previous came out, and the shots looked great. But then when I said, "Okay, can you send me the projects so I can look at it and put my set on it and start looking at the camera positions?" It was all out of whack because it was not based on anything real.
Right.
So I had to throw everything in the bin and start over. And luckily, Will was here to be a voice as well for me in front of all these extremely experienced people in this production, to say, give time to Quentin. He needs to be working on these things and listen to him. And so yeah, we had to do this this tech viz, which ironically enough, it's a part that I've been doing a lot before, but I never had a guideline for how to make a proper tech viz for VP that was. Sorry, yeah.
What I was going to say, explain what tech viz is.
Yeah, so the idea was to give on paper the information to people, all the departments, so when they look at your images you're giving them, they know exactly where the camera is going to be, what set design needs to be built, where the actors will be, what's the size of the wall and everything. So it was basically 3D views, top views, side views, with a lot of measurements of the studio we were shooting at, the LED wall, entire disposition, where ideally I was pushing the actors to be at a certain distance of the wall, and camera positions for each shot. And with the camera positions, we needed to see the frustum to know exactly which part of the set we'll see and which parts we can cheat. And that's an interesting process because I was doing it a bit on my own on my side, but I needed to be in contact with John Mattison, who's the DP on the project, and with Will and the studio and because I needed to know exactly what camera we're going to use, what's the sensor size, which lenses are we thinking of. And of course, everything was changing all the time. So we had to nail down to something that was not taking any risks. I was always trying to go wider a little bit, and I had to
Right.
guess a lot of the time what the DP would have to do and what sort of lenses it was going to use for certain shots. So I had to literally watch some movies that John did to be thinking, okay, he likes his 75 and 50 and on a Super
That
35.
there was,
Okay.
yeah. It's actually it's one of the, and it sounds as if you sort of you may come across it as well. It's one of the, I think one of the biggest challenges that most people have, and this is it's always a really hard thing to get your heads around, is the difference between being in a virtual 3D environment and seeing it from almost
Mm-hmm.
from a sort of a bird's eye helicopter view and going, okay, and you're moving around it as if you're in a game, and or seeing that on a big LED wall, and it's huge and you've got a big wide of that, compared to the Fostrum, which is the thing that everyone has to care
That's
about,
the key element because yeah, I mean,
right?
and that's another when you were talking about the misconceptions about VP. That's one. It's like people come in and look at the wall and they're like, the colors are weird. I'm like, of course the colors are weird. Like this is set to look good in camera. This is
Camera.
and not just the angles and not just the perspective and everything. It's everything in VP HCVFX needs to be seen through the camera, and I had that with John actually. That was very interesting because I thought John had already worked with VP because he did Gladiator 2, and I thought that they had used some VP on Gladiator, but they didn't. So it was an introduction for him, which was very interesting. So I really sort of insisted a lot with the production to get some time with him just before his physical pre-light. So at the moment where we had finished revamping all the Unreal projects and making sure they work perfectly fine and that we have the right amount of FPS and everything, and before the moment where he'll come in to do his pre-lighting on set, I took I think almost an hour with him where we sat down, looked at the monitor, put the camera in the middle, and looked at Unreal Engine and started simply relighting the scene, the virtual scene. This leading to that, he's an artist, so it didn't just go with relighting, but it was like, oh, let's put a bit of fog there, and maybe, oh, look, what about if we move that a bit there? So we really took that time. It was, I think, it was the best thing to do for someone like John, who's been a DP for, I don't know, 40, 50 years now, and who started on film. And I know that one of the things that I hate as a director of photography is that when I'm dealing on set with a tech that I don't understand. So I really just
Right.
wanted to make sure that
Right.
he would feel comfortable with it and that he would take control on the project. And by the end of that virtual pre-light, he spoke the same language as me. We understood each other. Everything was going well, and yeah, and it didn't stop him from sometimes looking at his next shot and moving around and looking at it and calling me and being, Quentin, this looks really wrong. Can you move everything? I'm like, John, just move your camera, mate. Oh yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I guess that's the interesting thing, and you touched on something really about like who's responsible for lighting the virtual environment. Because if a DAP doesn't know, or an art department doesn't know that they're responsible for this stuff, it sort of ends up on the lap of like sometimes the VP supervisor, who also
Yeah.
is a tech
Well,
artist at the same time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have a clear opinion on that, but it's because my background is being a DP, and I think everything that is aesthetic and inside the camera is the responsibility of the DP. It's not necessarily his job to do, but it's his responsibility for it to look good or not. So, I mean, that's how I've always lived my DP short career, and so for me, it's really important that the DP is involved at the beginning, and it's not something that people think about. And that job that we did with John and at the time that we took is something that should have happened earlier with the VAD department when The same way, for example, that Will, the production designer, went to the VFX company's office, sat down with the people who were doing the assets and talked to them and looked at everything. So I think it's the responsibility of the VP supervisor to be including the DOP properly and using the proper language that we'll understand and bringing him, making him able to have control over the image as much as he can.
Yeah, that fundamentally, you're absolutely right. It is their responsibility. It's nobody else's responsibility. I think it's just this bridge between, it's your responsibility, because I think, to your point, if it waits until it's on set, suddenly there is this whole big area of responsibility that the DOP didn't know they owned.
I tell you, there's something also as a DP is that I've mostly worked on projects that were short films. I mean, I've never done sci-fi or I've done a little bit of historical stuff. So whenever there is something that doesn't look right in the set design, no one who's watching the film will be thinking the set designer has done a bad job. They'll be thinking about the DP for some reason. I mean, actually, in my world, I always feel like it falls on our shoulders. So I've always been in position where my direction would always supersede the ones of the production designer, at least on short films. And because I was never working with, production designer stars. So I always felt that need and that responsibility that, everything that's going to be seen in camera, if the DP thinks it doesn't look good, it's his right to say, take it out or change it. Therefore, he's got the final say.
Well, actually, so this is maybe a slight segue as well. Is actually what is the best type of production virtual production is good for as well? Because I think you touched on it a bit earlier on. There was, during the pandemic, these big screens were made, and you had a company in France that financially couldn't survive. These huge stages which had these huge capexes that then couldn't reduce their costs because they had the big capex side of things. And the world isn't full of AAA tentpole films. There's local films. France has an incredibly vibrant film industry, as does a lot of other countries in Europe and globally as well, because we don't all speak English, funnily enough. So in your experience, or even what your feelings is about it, sort of where do you think that sweet spot is for the use of virtual production at the moment?
It really depends on the scope of things and the scopes of productions. But because I think yesterday or something like that, someone shared on LinkedIn an article that was just like a really good technical in-depth exploration of what was the workflow for Ashoka and for these other Star Wars shows. And what I find fascinating is to see how much the big volumes are used for these huge outdoor environments. From the beginning, I had this intuition that these big volumes are actually amazing for that. And that's what I think they should be used for mainly. And of course, there is the vision of VP where what I was mentioning when we're talking about having two actors talking in front of an LED wall and there's nothing else. Well, that's great for reshoots. That's great for retakes. And I think now every productions should actually really take that in consideration in their process. And when you go film, you always have guys scanning, and it's starting to really exist. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who are starting to implement that in their workflow for traditional productions, and where they're thinking, well, if we need to do a reshoot, well, we just need to go to the small studio there that has a 5 by 2 meters wall, and we can shoot all the close-ups there. And I think there is absolutely a use case for independent productions. Once again, the tools are getting cheaper and cheaper, but also because we know more and more intelligently how to use the tools. And we're starting to have directors, writers, and DPs who understand how the tool works and can put that in their creative kit early on. And if it's well thought, if it's well organized, I think I definitely see. I could see easily more and more common productions, TV shows. We're not talking platform shows. I'm talking like local TV shows. The kind of budget we have in France, the kind of budgets we have, for local TV shows in Australia, using car constantly. That's a great thing. Car process doesn't cost that much money, and it's saves so much for the production. You're not weather dependent. It's not dangerous. Your actors are safe. You can do that for like right amount of times. You can control the sun. I mean, it's just fantastic, and it's getting better and better. And you don't need something fancy. And now, like, I mean, what you get for a Blackmagic Pocket camera, you get some 4K, amazing color processing. We've all seen the Creator. I mean, a lot of shots in the Creator were done with this very small Sony camera that is considered as an entry level filmmaker camera. It costs nothing compared to what cameras used to cost. An
Oh, for sure.
Alexa Classic, I think, was 80,000 euros or something like that. I think at the beginning, it's like they can't. All the cost is going down, and we have access
Hey,
to the smaller filmmakers, and the small filmmakers, the small films. That's the one that's not going to die, because that's the one that we still make because we love making movies, because we are passionate about it, not because it makes money.
anyway, we're going to go to a last break.
Oh, hello. It's a bit quiet in here without an ad, but it doesn't have to be. Maybe you want to reach filmmakers, producers, and creatives who are all about the latest innovations in film, TV, advertising, corporate content, or social media. Got a game-changing tool that saves time and money? A virtual production studio that no one's heard of? But hey, you've got free snacks. Or maybe you just want to remind everyone that you're the best brand out there. Well, this silence, it could be yours. Get in touch at startingpixel.com and let's fill this space with something a little bit more exciting. The Starting Pixel podcast. Why film it any other way?
What are you up to at the moment? What's going on? You were in London.
Yeah, I was in London until end of January, and now I'm in Australia on the, is it East Coast? Yeah, near the Gold Coast. I'm in a position where right now I'm thinking about doing something disruptive. You were talking about that, but doing my own thing. I can bring VP to smaller productions in a more agile way and with lower costs. That's something I'd love to do, but I also want to expand on everything that I've learned, all the tech I've learned. I want to be able to do more creative things with the 3D worlds, the XR experience I've had. I've been thinking a lot about VR experiences. So that's the whole world that I've discovered in the past 5 years that I'm really getting into. Video game. I'd love to do a video game right now. Shooting, being a mocap. I mean, a DP on a video game. I think they should have, especially with Unreal Engine now being generalized in the video game industry and everyone wanting to do hyper realistic things. Like, bring in the artists, bring us in. Like, I would love to be spending time with the actors on the performance capture volume, and sort of being artistic director for the
Very sure.
light and the ambience. That's what we do.
Right.
So
Brilliant.
yeah,
Quentin, it's been such a pleasure as ever talking to you.
yeah, always.
And I'm sure we'll get you on again, talk about your next project, and we'll catch up soon. Thank you again,
Thanks
man.
so much, Rob. It's a real
All right.
pleasure.